What do you think of Christians who don't vote? Do you think they're right? Do you think they're wrong? Do you not even have an opinion? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And by that introduction, you can surely see where I stand on that issue. Christians most definitely should be engaged, fully engaged in politics and, more importantly, even in the culture. Before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. Just go to WashingtonTimes.com, find my name hyperlinked on the page, click on it, scroll to the bottom of my commentary, and you will find easy directions where to sign up for my newsletter, which comes out 3 times a week at the Washington Times, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And within that newsletter will not only be all my commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, but also my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts, which you can also get by just simply subscribing to Bold and Blunt at Washington Times or wherever podcasts are offered and available. So, are you one of those Christians out there in America who think, well, I live in this world, but not of this world, so that means I don't have to do anything that's of this world. I can just float through on my wings, on my angelic wings, flashing my halo above my head, and pretend that I love humanity and I love all, and I love so much that I just refuse to get involved in these politics and these nasty discussions that we have about the culture and political corruption and scandals and so forth in America. I rise above. I'm on wings of angels. So if you're one of those Christians, shame on you. 30 million Christians aren't registered or don't vote, the Baptist Press wrote some time ago. Meet the evangelicals who won't vote for Trump, Biden, or anybody, Christianity Today wrote in 2020. 15 million Christians aren't registered to vote, CBN reported in 2019. Why Christians are not morally obligated to vote, the Gospel Coalition, October 2020. And here's one, even blunter. Don't vote, an alternative to American politics. Christandpopculture.com wrote that particular headline. These are all headlines addressing the matter of whether Christians in America do vote, at what level Christians in America vote, and whether Christians in America should indeed vote at all. Well, let me ask you this. If you're a Christian in America and you think that you don't have to vote because A, it's not your business because you live in this world but not of this world, or B, the candidates that you have to choose from don't meet your Christian smell test, I've got a question to ask you. How's that working? Because look around in America right now and look at all the evil that is steamrolling across this nation, seeping into our public school systems, seeping through our political halls of power, seeping into the minds and hearts of American citizens who are being told to accept the idea that transgenderism is normal and boys can become girls simply by wearing dresses, and then that gives them the right to go into girls' dressing rooms. How is that working for you, sitting out the political world? And how is it possible to not be able to select among candidates because they don't meet your particular smell test? They don't meet your standard of biblical standards, of biblical behaviors. How is that possible? Name somebody in the Bible, which I've read, by the way, more than once. Name somebody in the Bible who is perfect. And ding, 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 you can't name Jesus. Well, there's your list. It's a list of nothingness. You know, David, a man after God's own heart, was an adulterer and murderer because he sent the husband of the woman that he committed adultery with into the front lines of battle with full intention that he would die. Geez. And Donald Trump's Twitter feed is worse than that? So I don't get this argument that Christians have that they're too good for politics. Politics is too distasteful. Politics is something that really doesn't touch on their lives because guess what? It's touching on our entire country. And our country, because too many Christians have sat on the sidelines and pretended that politics and elections and voting don't matter to them and their families and their children. Our world has become very black, and perilous times have really descended upon America. We're to the point now where it's far beyond just the next election. We have forces in the global governments who are busy pushing their agenda through this feckless White House because the president is a puppet and is on board, in line with the globalist agenda. And the leftists at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, at the World Health Organization, at the United Nations, see in him a time like no other in U.S. history. An opportunity to get their agenda put into America's systems to the point where even our elections won't matter. Just think of this. If we have all our corporations in America on board with the ESG agenda, the environmental social governance goals, which basically says businesses aren't in business so much to make profits as they are to advance a far leftist narrative and agenda. If we have our corporations and companies on board with that, what difference does it make if we elect so-and-so Republican or so-and-so conservative to Congress? Where we do our business will be all about advancing the leftist narrative and feeding the cycle of far leftist agenda. And that's just one example. We've already ceded our public school systems to the far leftists, to the socialists and communists, and now we're feeling the fire from that. We're seeing generations of youth come out of not just colleges anymore, but high school with an anti-America, anti-free market, anti-constitution, anti-founding father belief system. And they're taking that belief system and they're advocating on the side of communism and collectivism in America. They think government is the solution, whereas previous generations knew that government was the problem. This is what happens when Christians decide elections don't matter, voting doesn't matter, getting involved in politics doesn't matter. I send my kids to private Christian schools, so what difference does it make to me how the public school system goes? Well, if you add up the numbers of kids in this country who go to private Christian schools and add up the number of kids in this country who go to secular public schools, it's kind of a bazillion to one type of ratio. And so when you have the bazillions running the country, the voices of the ones becomes very quiet and stifled to the point where they're blotted out completely. Hopefully, Christians in these coming midterms will get out and vote with their Bible in one hand and their Constitution in the other. And you know what? Maybe they'll have their Second Amendment in their back pocket. Who knows? But this is what we need more of in this country. Worldviews of Judeo-Christian belief followed by conservative, limited government principles, backed by a determination to demand government stay stay in line with those principles. I have with me a guest today who can comment on the importance of Christians voting in elections. His name is Jason Yates. He is the CEO, Chief Executive of My Faith Votes. That's MyFaithVotes.org. Go to the website, check out the sad and sorry statistics that his organization tracks about Christians voting in elections. But in the meanwhile, listen to him here. Jason, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me on here and being able to talk a little bit about what's going on with these midterm elections and why it's so important that Christians be a part of the process.
Exactly. And you're with the organization My Faith Votes. Tell me a little bit about what your organization does, but I understand that few Christians actually vote in most elections. Do you have the stats on that as well?
Yeah, we got started in 2015 because of these stats. We learned that in 2012 that 25 million Christians who were registered to vote didn't cast a vote. Put that in context for you. That's the voting population of 22 states. Wow. That's a huge amount of people, and we couldn't believe it. We said, man, so much influence being left on the sidelines. The Bible calls Christians to be salt and light, to influence the world around them. We recognize that's in every area of our life, not just politics, but every area. But it does include politics. And so to be truly faithful to the Word of God, we should be involved. We should be voting. Not to create a theocracy, but simply to bring the good of our faith, the influence. We live in a great country that is for we the people. All of us are to be involved, to represent our values, Christians as well, and that's what we want to see happen. So My Faith Votes it was birthed out of that, and we exist simply to motivate and equip Christians to vote in every election, presidential to off-year elections, but also certainly including midterm elections.
25 million Christians registered to vote sat on the sidelines in 2012. That makes me a little bit angry. What's the reason that you find?
There's actually a few reasons that I find, and I kind of bucket it into four categories. I'll go through them real quickly. One is just apathy. It's the person who's saying, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter." I kind of think those people haven't really connected their faith, this idea of being salt and light in our nation, in the world around us. And so we have to help people, those folks, better understand that and what their call and their identity of their faith should mean to them. Another is what I put the label on is self-righteous. You know, it's the person, Cheryl, that you hear that says, I could never vote for those people, so I'm going to stay out of it. Well, as far as I know, Christ isn't on the ballot for any of the elections this year. We all have choices of good, best, better, maybe worse. And we have to use discernment and wisdom in those choices and to make a choice, because not voting actually is a choice as well, a choice that doesn't get you the values and the solutions that you would want to see. The third is deceived. You know, so many people buy into this concept of the separation of church and state, that for some reason people of faith shouldn't be involved in the process or shouldn't be included. And of course we know that's absolutely wrong. Our government never said that people of faith shouldn't be included. Our Bible certainly doesn't say that. So we really should be involved. And the last is just uninformed. This is really no fault other than not paying attention. Sometimes we just don't know elections are happening until we see a sign on a corner saying to vote for somebody. So those are the reasons. I think they're all solvable, and that's why My Faith Votes exist, to give people a reason to help them pray for our nation, think biblically about the issues, and vote consistently in every election.
What do you think about those Christians who say, well, I'm commanded to live in this world, but not of this world, and that's why I choose not to vote?
Yeah, too many people think, right, that, when we become saved, when we accept the grace of Jesus Christ into our lives that atones for our sins, that we're then called just to hang on tightly until he returns, right? But I read it very differently, that we are to be involved and engaged. The Bible says in Galatians 6:10, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, but especially those of the faith. And so I look at it, Cheryl, and I say, man, we're called to do good. We're called to put our faith into action, to influence the world around us. And I believe voting is an opportunity to do good. We know that the solutions that we represent are indeed good because they're full of faith-filled. And so we absolutely need to be putting our faith into action at every turn, but especially in voting.
Yeah, it's just common sense to me. If you're a Christian and you see the secular world to the evil or atheist forces, then you're going to get a world that's evil and run by atheists. And yet, if you're a Christian and you get involved in the political world, then that paves the way for a better world, more godly at least, yes?
Yeah, and all we need to do is look around at what's happening, right? I mean, look at the issues. We've got abortion. It now is an issue that has moved to the states. Abortion hasn't been outlawed. The Roe going away doesn't mean abortion goes away. It just puts the decisions at the state levels. So we still have a great opportunity to represent our faith and, frankly, to stop the killing of innocent babies. Look around at what's happening in our schools. Just the teachings, the corruption of our kids being taught about transgenderism and things that take them away from biblical concepts of how God created the world. Some common sense things that we need to be involved, and that's where it's not just at the U.S. Senate level races or presidential races, but all the way down to school board. It matters. In fact, I think some of the local races matter more than the federal races because that's where we really see the most impact, the most influence in our daily lives.
I wonder if you have an opinion about this, because I know that the drive behind your organization is to activate Christians to get involved in the political process, to get out and vote. But at the same time, you must have noticed that in the churches in America, there has been a certain watering of biblical truths. There's been a social justice gospel that has reawakened in some of the churches. And so that some of the Christian voters out there are bringing forward that viewpoint into the ballot boxes. And I wonder if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I can. And there's a great book. It is Rod, I'm trying to remember, it's Live Not by Lies, Rod Dreher. And he brings up a concept in there about how in churches today, we have this belief that all God wants for us is to be happy. And I think that's what's happening in our churches today, that we've been so focused on just sharing the gospel and people accepting the gospel, as I said before, that people just then want to hang on tight until Christ returns without thinking about how they influence the world around them. But it can't be, as you're saying, this social justice. There's something else that's happening in churches today, and it's called deconstructionism, where we're not trusting biblical truth and teaching from the past 2,000 years, but instead we're saying it's all wrong. We've got to break it all down and build it back up to what we think and feel. There's too many feelings that are happening, and it's why so many people just think we just are there. God's there to help us be happy, to feel good about what we do. Well, it's not about us. It's about Him and serving Him in His truth that has indeed existed for over 2,000 years, in fact, for eternity. And so the concepts of deconstructionism, of just, this attitudes focused on feelings in our churches, we've got to step back and say, no, we trust a God who doesn't change, who it's not about us. And because of that, that's why we put our faith into action, because we know that we serve a God. There is truth, there is consistency in what we do and why we do it. So I agree with you. We've got to break through those barriers and trust the teachings. And it's why we focus, we say pray, think, and vote. And that thinks piece is so important. We have to think biblically, not breaking down what the Word said and building it back up, but trusting it for its long-lasting truth.
And I think core to that is individuals reading the Bibles themselves, because I was listening with a smile on your face when you were talking about the happiness that's being pushed as biblical truths, because I read the Bible myself and I look at Jesus's disciples and they were some tortured individuals. And, you look at the prophets, you look at the apostles, none of them, if you asked by today's standards, would declare that their lives were happy in the eyes of the secular world, but they were certainly content and joyous in Jesus. And I just think people miss that because they don't read the Bible themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I think some of the same studies that you've been talking that you were referring to that are also looking at biblical just awareness and you're absolutely right. We don't know the Bible like we should. We read it for what we want to get out of it, not for what its truth and what it should teach us. So there's too much of that going on in the world today. We have to understand the arcing narrative of the Word and understand the truth of it without trying to read it so it just supports what we believe and hope for.
This seems like we are in America at least, in this cycle that's going to be very difficult to break, because your organization pushes Christians to get into the political world and vote, which is great. But a lot of churches are teaching Christians that the political world is one that's supposed to be about advancing happiness for the individual, and they cite the Bible to support those beliefs. And so the cycle is bringing us farther and farther down a path toward leftist, very, very un-American in the end. So how do we, in the end, break that cycle if the churches are failing?
Yeah, Cheryl, I don't know that it's just the churches, because the resistance that does exist at many churches across America to be involved and engaged is also very paramount in Christian college and universities. We have an outreach to those campuses, and I will tell you that there is a void. While you go to secular schools, they are more than willing to invite Planned Parenthood and others who are registering kids to vote. But on Christian schools, it's that same fear of being labeled, right or left, and so there's a void. And so What's going to break the cycle? I'm not 100% sure, other than a remnant. People who just commit to being involved, to standing strong, uniting with others who do the same. That's what's going to do it. Now, the Bible doesn't say that we are going to be in the majority. In fact, it warns us that we will be in the minority. And I think in America, that's coming. We have to recognize that, but we have to stand strong regardless. It's so important that we remain committed to our biblical beliefs, stand strong with them, regardless of what happens in our nation. The persecution is getting higher. It's worsening. It's a reality when we have bakers and florists and coaches being fined and sued for just standing for their biblical beliefs. That's going to elevate. I do believe that. The Bible warns us of it. We just need to be consistent and committed to our faith.
I think that's the perfect answer, Jason, because that's a difficult question. Nobody has the answer to that, but I think that's the perfect answer. Speaking about the remnant and God provides for his people, and just how do you stand up to the evil? You just do. You just stand strong. I think we have time just for one other quick question. Looking at the midterms coming up in November, how confident are you that Christians looking around at the perils of America and the world right now are going to get out and vote, or do you see it going the other way, driving the apathy factor?
Yeah, we just launched, or just got back some results of a study that say 9 out of 10 evangelicals say they are very committed to voting in these elections. So that sounds like great news. But history tells us that's not what they actually do. So what they say versus what they do might be two different things. So we can't just rest, if you will, on our laurels. We have to be diligent about getting people to the polls. That's what My Faith Votes is all about. We're not taking anything for granted. We are reaching out to millions through targeted efforts, through mass media, through churches, through college, Christian campuses. We're not letting any stone unturned, believe me, because we need to make sure that each and every one is indeed voting.
And the website is myfaithvotes.org. Jason, I would love to have you back on after the elections when you collect the data and you get the stats together. I would love to know how Christians turned out in these midterms.
Yeah, that would be great. And Cheryl, for anyone listening who does want to get more informed, go to myfaithvotes.org. We have My Voter Hub, a great resource. I think it's the most comprehensive resource for the Christian at election time to get prepared and to cast a biblically informed vote.
Great tip. Thank you. Thank you, Jason, so much for your time and for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you and all you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Christians who don't vote, what do you think about them? I think they are derelict in their duties. But that's just my humble opinion. Look, this is why we are where we're at in America right now. That those who are supposed to know better have let the evil take over and dominate in the politics and culture. And so the solution is simple. Christians, get up, get out, and vote. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, or wherever podcasts are offered. And I want to give one other quick mention. If you want to learn more about the need for Christians to vote, my second to last recent book is entitled Socialists Don't Sleep. Christians Must Rise or America Will Fall. It speaks directly to this point. And while you're picking that book up, go ahead and get my latest. Lock Down, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom, explores what went wrong with the government overreach during the coronavirus and more importantly, what government has in store for the future to continue the lockdowns that they put poor Americans through for 2+ years. It's available, both books are available, as a matter of fact, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, anywhere books are offered, or you can go right to my own personal website, CherylChumley.com. Click on the links there and order through that. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing to Bold and Blunt. Thank you for being a supporter. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.